It's the International Soccer Preview, and we are Soccerphiles Canada. Welcome to Series 28, looking at the groups and teams of the 2024 Copa America. This episode is looking at Group A, Argentina, Peru, Chile, and Canada. Here we go! It's the International Soccer Preview by Soccerphiles Canada, Series 28. I'm Kevin.
And I'm Connor. And today we begin our look at Group A for the Copa America 2024 tournament. This group is made up of Argentina, Peru, Chile, and Canada.
Yeah, and we're currently focused on the 2024 Euro Cup and the 2024 Copa America. Both of those are played in June 2024. We're producing this group and team series as well as a player series for each. There are two parts to this media cast.
So first, we'll give a summary of each team's World and Regional Cup histories. We'll also take a bit of a closer look at their recent history and form, including how they qualified for this tournament, if they had to do so.
Right. And we'll also look at the teams in comparison to each other in part two, looking at their rankings, head-to-head histories, and their chances of success. And then we'll end with a discussion of their prospects and our predictions.
All right, ready to get started?
You betcha. Let's jump in with our first team, Argentina. And I'll kind of give the broader history here. So Argentina's greatest periods in the Copa America did not match their greatest periods in the World Cups. It's a shame that a strong period in the 1950s in Copa America saw them not participating in the two World Cups and doing poorly on their return in 1958. Their best period in World Cup, their two titles in 1978 and 1986, coincided with their worst period in South America, knocked out at the group stage 3 times in a row from 1975 to 1983. Despite great success in Copa America play, reaching the final in 28 of the 44 tournaments they participated in, they suffered a long dry spell from 1991, with no titles in either competition, a matter finally redressed with a Copa America title in 2021, which, along with the 2022 World Cup title, glorified the era of Lionel Messi, one of their greatest.
Yeah, interesting history there. Argentina's drought from 1991 belies their overall strength as a top-tier team in the region and in the world. Even weak periods in one competition are bolstered by strong performances in the other. They have not failed to reach the final rounds of the World Cup since 2002, and one has to go back to 1983 to see them last knocked out at the group stage in that competition. Second place finishes in the 2014 World Cup and 2015 Copa America made a longed-for title that much more tantalizing, but it slipped their grasp until 2021. Now they have that monkey off their back. They seem a constant threat to win any tournament they enter.
Yeah, and I should say, Connor, if people are looking at the graphics, we only gave the Copa America history from 1963 onwards, which I regret because, as I said, the 50s was Argentina's greatest period. But the competition started in 1916, so it just made the graphics too busy, even busier than they are now.
Yeah.
Anyway, let's move on to a closer look at their recent history, and we're going to look at the last kind of few competitions that the team was involved in, beginning with Argentina in the 2021 Copa America.
Yeah, so Argentina topped their 5-team group stage, tying Chile in their opener, but then beating Uruguay, Paraguay, and Bolivia. In the quarterfinal stage, they beat Ecuador 3-0. In the semifinals, it took penalties to overcome Colombia. And then in the final, they met their arch rivals, Brazil. And as we mentioned, Argentina won that final, making it a first title for them for 30 years.
Yeah, a bit of an odd format there with the 5-team groups. There were 2 5-team groups because they couldn't invite anyone else in order to make up the 12 or 16-team tournament.
That's right.
Okay, the next one, we'll take a look at the World Cup finals here.
Yeah, so of course there was, it's a mega qualification with all 10 teams playing each other home and away. Argentina went undefeated in qualifying, 11 wins and 6 draws, and they actually had one game in Brazil that never got played. It was postponed, and then by the time they came around to playing it, both those teams had qualified. So in any case, an undefeated and strong qualification campaign that saw them second behind Brazil.
Yeah, I'm way ahead of third place Uruguay there. So that brought them to the finals, of course.
Yeah, and everyone probably remembers that ominous start with a 2-1 defeat to Saudi Arabia. Were they going out at the group stage? No, they weren't. They recovered with victories over Mexico and Poland. And then, as we know, they went to the final, beating first Australia, then Netherlands in penalties, then Croatia in the semifinals, and France in the final. That game, of course, went 2-2 in regular time, 3-3 after extra time, and 4-2 in penalties in Argentina's favor.
Yeah, what a great final that was.
Yeah, one of the best.
You bet. Okay, well, there has been action since then. We'll maybe jump down and just quickly say that there is no qualifying for the South American teams for the Copa America here. There is qualifying for the CONCACAF teams that join, but we'll deal with that when we have CONCACAF teams. So no qualifying for them for this tournament, but they have started their, as you say, mega group for World Cup qualifying for 2026.
Yeah, they're 6 games into an 18-game schedule, and it's a very strong start for Argentina. They've won 5 of their 6 games, including a 1-0 win in Brazil. Their only setback was actually a home reverse against neighbors Uruguay.
Right, so trading off one for the other, but that leaves them in first place with 6 of the 18 games played. Okay, that is it for Argentina. So let's move on to Peru and the broad overview for Peru. I got to find my place here. Peru is actually among the oldest of teams participating in the Copa America from 1927 and in the first World Cup in 1930. Despite losing both games in that World Cup, it was a strong period which saw them earn one of their 2 Copa America titles in 1939. They were unremarkable after that, despite a couple of third-place finishes in Copa America tournaments, and did not actually compete in World Cup play after 1930. They re-entered in 1950. And yes, the 1970s saw Peru's best period, reaching 3 of 4 World Cups and passing the group stage. In 2 of them, as well as winning their second Copa America title in 1975, amid strong performances in general. That good period ended in 1983 and was followed by a weak 10 years in Copa America play, and then a weak 10 years period in World Cup play. In 2011, their form rose again, beginning with 2 third-place finishes in Copa America, and then in 2018, reaching their first World Cup since 1982. And they followed that up with a second-place finish in the 2019 Copa America.
Right, while not reaching the level of the 1970s form, that peak in 2018 and 2019 represents their second strongest period, perhaps equal with their form in the 1930s. Since 2011, they have finished in the top 4 in 4 of the 5 cups, and a 5th place finish in the 10-team South American qualifying group earned them an intercontinental playoff in 2022, losing just 1 step from a second World Cup qualification in a row.
That's right. I'm going to take a closer look since that is part of their recent history. But we begin the recent history with the Copa America in 2021.
Yeah, Peru finished second in their 5-team group stage, behind Brazil, who they lost to, but ahead of Colombia, Ecuador, and Venezuela, picking up two wins and a draw from those 3 matches. So they went through in second place. That set up a quarterfinal with Paraguay. It was 3-3, and Peru won 4-3 in penalties. In the semifinal, they met Brazil again and lost again, and that set up a third place match with Colombia, which they lost, having beaten Colombia earlier in the group stage.
Right, so a pretty good finish there for Peru, kind of continuing a good run of form. Let's see how they did in the World Cup 2022 campaign.
Yeah, so Peru won 7 of their 18 games, drawing 3 and losing 6. They finished 5th, 1 point ahead of Colombia to secure the intercontinental playoff spot. There they met Australia. That was just a one-off match, if I believe.
Yeah.
And it went 0-0, and it went to penalties. Peru agonizingly losing 5-4 to Australia. So, as you've said, unable to make a second World Cup in the row, but showing them again kind of on the stronger half of the South American teams.
Yeah. Okay. Well, again, I'll say just quickly that they qualify automatically for this Copa America in 2024. So we have no games to look at there, but we can look at the World Cup qualifying campaign for 2026, which has started.
Yeah, looking to see if Peru can continue their general good form, and so far it's not proving to be the case. They've lost 4 and tied 2 of their 6 qualifying games so far, which actually leaves them bottom of the 10-team table. They lost twice at home, albeit to Brazil and Argentina, so some tough matches out of the way. But 10th place, kind of a bit stark compared to their recent form.
Yeah, but I believe in 2022 they also kind of started poorly and turned it around, and as you say, they're kind of playing some of their difficult home games there. But yeah, certainly not 10th place, not where they want to be.
No.
All right, well, that brings us to the end of Peru, so let's move on to our third team, Chile. And begin with a kind of a broader history. So Chile is among the most senior of teams, having participated in the first Copa America in 1916 and in the first World Cup in 1930. They did miss a few editions in both tournaments, most notably a World Cup disqualification in 1990 and a subsequent ban in 1994. That was for trickery, a somewhat defining trait of Chile, along with roughness and red cards. They have reached around half of the World Cups they entered and passed the group stage in almost half of those. That amounts to 4 times, but in 3 of them, they were knocked out at the first step after going beyond the group stage. In 1962, though, they earned their best World Cup result. That was 3rd place in the tournament which they hosted. The Copa America sees many 3rd place finishes in Chile's history, a single 2nd place finish in 1956, and in 2 of 3 cups between 1979 and 1987 were their only appearances in the final, until a great recent period saw them win back-to-back tournaments in 2015 and 2016. However, they've gone into a bit of decline since.
Yeah, something of the golden generation saw them reach back-to-back World Cups in 2010 and 2014, and even pass the group stage both times. They went on to win back-to-back Copa Americas in 2015 and 16. Decline started with a 6th place finish in their 10-team qualifying cycle in South America for the 2018 World Cup, which was still actually a better than average finish. 4th place in the 2019 Copa America was also a respectable result, but in both competition, the results were slightly lower than next time in their more recent campaigns.
Right, and we'll look at those recent campaigns, beginning with the 2021 Copa America.
Yeah, so in the 5-team group stage, Chile finished 4th, which actually is enough to advance. But their only win came against bottom finishers Bolivia, who lost all 4 of their games. That 4th place finish set up a difficult quarterfinal against Brazil. It was an action-packed game that finished 1-0 for the Brazilians.
Right. So a bit inconsistent in their performance there in the group stage. They tied Argentina and Uruguay, but then lost to Paraguay. So kind of hard to peg Chile right now. Let's try and get a little closer by looking at their World Cup 2022 campaign.
Yeah, so Chile won 8 matches, but actually lost 9. Or sorry, was it
1-5, drew
1-5?
4,
Yeah,
and
and
lost
lost
9. Yeah.
9. Yeah, so that saw them in 7th place. That's 5 points behind the intercontinental spot, and 7 points behind the automatic qualifying spot. So they were competitive at kind of mid-table, but ultimately a few points back of what was needed to get to the World Cup.
Right. That's right. Okay, again, they qualify automatically for this cup, so we'll move right on to the qualifying campaign for the 2026 World Cup.
Yeah, and Chile have proven strong at home where they're undefeated, but weak on the road where they've lost all their games. Those losses are in Uruguay, Venezuela, and Ecuador. So some tough games, but some tough visits, road trips still to come. They have yet to play Argentina or Brazil. So they've only got 5 points from their 6 matches, which sees them in 8th spot, and yeah, some difficult games ahead. So not probably the start that Chile were looking for.
Yeah, but a bit notably, the only game they have won is against Peru, who they meet here. But home and away makes a big difference in South America. So the fact that they won at home, isn't necessarily a sign that they're a stronger team. But of course, we'll get into that in part 2 where we compare the teams. Okay, that brings us to the end of Chile. And so now we move on to the CONCACAF team in the group, Canada among the South American teams. And I'll begin with a broader history for Canada. Canada's first campaign was for the 1958 World Cup, but they dropped out of that competition until 1970. And they also didn't participate in the Regional Cup until around that time. 1973 was their first go at that. Since then, participation in both was consistent, except for an odd withdrawal from the 1998 Gold Cup. Canada periodically rises up to challenge at the top of the region, but more commonly as a second or even third tier team. They rose up in 1958 to win both the CONCACAF Championship and a spot in the 1986 World Cup.
I'll just correct you, Kevin. Sorry, it's 1985.
What did I say?
1958.
Good Lord.
Yeah.
Okay. And I'll also clarify that those were both the same competition. So winning that 1985 CONCACAF Championship automatically qualified them for the World Cup the following year. They also, in 2000, won the Gold Cup, and recently in 2022, won the regional qualifying group for World Cup qualification, so reached the World Cup for the second time there. In both World Cup appearances, they lost all 3 games, so are clearly out of their depth once there. The top tier performance in the region that got them there was actually quite rare, and more common is a second or third tier performance, sometimes not even making the final round of World Cup qualification. That in itself would suggest a struggle to reach beyond the group stage in their regional cup, but actually they do a little better at that level. They've passed the group stage about half the time, so a little stronger in Gold Cup than in World Cup play, where from 2002 to 2018, they failed to even reach the final round of qualification. So their 2 titles in the regional tournament in 1985 and 2000 are accompanied by 3 other finishes in the top 4, most recently in the 2021 Gold Cup.
Yeah, that 2021 Gold Cup semifinal finish combines with the World Cup qualification in 2022 to give Canada its 3rd strong period, consistent with their pattern of rising to top tier form every 15 years. But this one is the most sustained. After 3 exits at Gold Cup group stages to 2015, they have passed the group stage all 4 times since. The quality of players, judged by their club affiliations, far surpasses that of any other strong period, and that these players are young offers promise going forward.
Okay, are we going to confess to any bias here? I mean, wearing Canada t-shirts is a bit of a giveaway.
I think we have to confess to our bias, which regular listeners will be aware of already, I suppose.
Yeah, that's right, and hey, we can't help it, and I think we've been pretty good so far.
So far.
Okay, let's move to recent competitions for Canada. One of the best teams in the world. Let's move on to Canada's recent history, beginning with the World Cup 2022 finals, Connor, where they were undoubtedly robbed of the title.
Yeah, of course. But they did get the title in qualifying. This was a 18 group stage with 14 games played. And Canada came out top of the pile ahead of both Mexico and the USA. Ahead of Mexico on goal difference, it should be said. Canada was particularly strong at home, winning 6 of their 7 games and drawing the other, including beating Costa Rica and Mexico in the freezing cold of Edmonton, games which we were at.
Yeah, they named the stadium the Ice Tecker. Great. Okay, let's move on. So a wonderful performance there in qualifying gave them great promise going into the finals.
Yeah, there was a fair bit of optimism, even though they were put in what looked like a difficult group and then actually proved to be a very difficult group. They lost narrowly to Belgium in their first game. That was actually a really good performance by Canada, and a bit of a Belgium struggles, a bit of a sign of things to come for them. They then lost handily 4-1 to Croatia before losing their final match to Morocco. But both, of course, Croatia and Morocco went on all the way to the semifinals of the tournament.
Yeah. So, yeah, I think a poor refereeing decision prevented them from reaching the final alongside Argentina, where they clearly deserved to be.
Yeah.
But no, seriously, I remember when the draw came out and Canada was put in the group, and one of the final teams drawn. It was between Tunisia and Morocco, and unfortunately, you know, Morocco was probably the strongest looking African team going into the cup, whereas Tunisia was probably the easier. So I was distraught that they were drawn against Morocco.
Yeah, Morocco ended up topping the group in their fabulous World Cup campaign. So
yeah. So yeah, as you say, kind of turned out to be a tougher group than we thought going in. But as in 1986, lost all 3 games. Let's take a look then at the competition shortly afterwards. Actually, the 2022-23 Nations League, the group stage was played in 2022 before the World Cup, and the semi-final and finals, the finals were played in 2023 in June. How did they do there?
Yeah, they had little trouble winning their Nations League A group ahead of Honduras and Curacao. I say little trouble. They actually did lose 2-1 in Honduras, but ended up winning the group by 3 points. In the semifinal, they met Panama, who they beat 2-0, and that set them up in the final of the Nations League against the United States, but they lost that game 2-0.
Yeah, but in terms of their broad history, I think reaching the final stages there and perhaps even remaining in League A is speaking well of the strong period they're in.
It is, and it was definitely correlated with their very strong World Cup play and qualifying campaign leading up to it.
That's right. Okay, the next tournament we look at is very shortly after those finals, the Gold Cup in 2023.
Yeah, and here their form dropped off a little bit. They tied Guadeloupe and Guatemala, and then needed a victory in their final game against Cuba to go through, which they managed to do. But that second place finish in the group set up a difficult quarterfinal match against the USA. It was kind of a thrilling game. It was 1-1 after in regular time, with USA scoring in 88 and Canada equalizing in 90+3.
Right.
And then in extra time, Canada took the lead, but then the USA scored a late goal, and that sent the match to penalties, which the USA won.
Yeah, and we should point out here that Canada, well, I guess Canada and USA, but Canada sent a B team to this tournament. I really thought that was a bit of a lost opportunity because USA and Mexico also sent B teams to the tournament. And the form Canada was coming out of after the qualification for the World Cup meant, I think if they had sent an A team, they would have had a decent chance of winning.
Yeah, I do agree, and the slow start in the group stage really made it difficult. But they were competitive with the USA, so not the worst. But yeah, I think they're at the stage where they like to try and be getting to finals again.
Yeah. Anyway, that was played shortly after the World Cup in December of 2022, so that's why most of the teams, big teams, were sending, or World Cup qualifying teams, the World Cup teams were sending B teams to this tournament. Okay, I'm getting all tied up in knots here. And this is actually quite complex. We saw they did finish first in their group in the previous Nations League. So that put them in League A for the 2023-24 campaign. Do you want to take it from there?
Yeah, a bit of a different format. There was no group stage for Canada. They just got a bye. They were kind of entered with a quarterfinal match against Jamaica. A home and away. They won 2-1 on the road, but then blew a lead at home and lost 3-2, and Jamaica advanced on away goals.
Right, so a bit of a lapse there for sure, and they didn't make the finals as they had the previous edition. Okay, and then the last thing we look at then is qualifying for this Copa America tournament. The CONCACAF teams did have to go through some qualification.
Yeah, so that home and away Nations League matchup against Jamaica proved to be the first stage of qualifying for Copa America. Again, all a little bit complex, but Canada lost that. Jamaica advanced directly to the Copa America. Canada needed to play a playoff basically against Trinidad and Tobago. That was a one-off match, which Canada won.
Right, so that's how they got into the Copa America tournament. And we have looked at the beginnings of World Cup qualifying for the South American region, but that hasn't begun in the CONCACAF region. The main round begins in early June of 2024. So actually before the Cup here, we get the first World Cup qualifying games. But they haven't been played at the time of this recording. So that brings us to the end of the part one, the kind of overviews or histories of the team. So let's move on to part two, where we compare the teams. And we'll begin with the pots and rankings here.
Yeah, the pots are, I guess, set up a little bit differently. The pot one teams are the top two North American and the top two South American teams. That's Argentina, Brazil, and Mexico and the United States. The South American teams make up the next two pots, and then the other four CONCACAF teams are in pot four. So Canada comes from pot four, but I guess it doesn't tell us a whole lot. Other than that, they are the top ranked team from pot four.
Right. Not based on rankings there, but more on just kind of matching up the tournaments, making sure that no team has all South American groups.
Yeah.
Or no groups has all South American teams. And okay, so let's actually look at the rankings for these teams.
Yeah. So Argentina, they are first in the world. The number one ranked team, so obviously top ranked team in the tournament. The pot two team is Peru. They're 35th. That's in both FIFA and ELO rankings. I should say Argentina's first in both systems. Chile is 40th and 43rd, respectively, so just a little bit behind Peru. And then Canada is not far behind in world rankings. They're 48th, and they're actually between Chile and Peru in ELO. 37th.
Yeah, so just on the surface of it, Connor, the rankings would suggest, the FIFA rankings would suggest a fairly clear pattern: Peru, Chile, then Canada, whereas the ELO rankings suggest a bit of a battle amongst them. Just give us a preface of whether you consider it a battle or fairly clear cut.
Yeah, I think it will be a bit of a battle. It's tough to say when these teams don't play each other all that often. But in the ELO rankings, which we tend to view as a bit more reliable because it fluctuates less in the short term, Peru, Chile, and Canada all are within 8 spots of each other. So, pretty close, you'd have to say, with Argentina, of course, vastly ahead.
Yeah, great. Okay, well, we will get into that, of course, in the discussion, but let's move on to the second basis of comparison here, the head-to-head. We begin with, well, you take us through it, and I'll give any details.
Yeah, so all the South American teams meet each other quite regularly in World Cup qualifying and Copa America, so there's a kind of lengthy head-to-head records. Argentina and Peru. Argentina has a better record, winning 16 matches. They've tied 8, and Peru has got the best of Argentina just 3 times.
Right, and I believe this goes from 1963 rather than going all the way back to 1916. But the significant results, I guess, would be the most recent ones. And Peru hasn't beaten Argentina since 1997. So I think that's the most salient point. They have, as we can see, are you surprised by the number of ties there? 16 wins, but Peru has tied them 8 times.
Yeah, I mean, you mentioned before that that home and away can make a big difference in South America, especially, there's certain teams playing at altitude, Peru being one of them. They're not the highest, but so I think, I would expect to see a lot of those ties and the Peru wins primarily being played in Peru.
Yeah, you're probably right there. But in 2018 World Cup qualifying, the teams tied both legs. Since then, Argentina has had the best of it, winning all 3 of their meetings, including in 2026 World Cup qualifying here. All right, let's move on to the next one.
Yeah, Argentina and Chile. And Argentina, once again, is the dominant team in this matchup. Argentina have won 18 games. That's 2/3 of their meetings. They've tied 6, and Chile has won 3 times.
Yeah. That's right. And Chile actually, some of those wins were during that strong period. They beat them in both the 2015 Copa America final and the 2016 Copa Centenario final. Both of those wins coming on penalties. Since then, it's mostly been Argentina, but they did tie in the 2021 Copa America group stage and in 2022 World Cup qualifying. They haven't met in the recent World Cup qualifying campaign.
Yeah, Chile beating Argentina in back-to-back finals just a year apart, denying Messi a title. Chile haven't won the majority of games, but they've made the most of the ones that they have.
Yeah, certainly. Yeah, I wouldn't be surprised if Argentina still has a grudge about that. Okay, then we have basically any games involving Canada will be what you see here.
Yeah, no history in competitive meetings. That's a World Cup or Regional Cup. So, yes, North American teams have been invited to Copa America before, but Canada not often one of those.
Right. Same with Peru.
Yeah, Peru and Canada have never met.
Okay, we move on to Chile versus Peru.
Yeah, so these neighbors have met several times. Chile's won 17 matches, Peru has won 10, and 4 of them have ended in ties.
Yeah, so Chile with actually a more superior record than I would have guessed. Are you surprised by that?
I'm most surprised that only 4 games have been tied. That's not that many. It seems that these games have a winner.
Yeah, especially 2 teams that do seem fairly even on the surface.
Yeah.
All right, and there's one more to go here.
Yeah, that's Chile, Canada, and they haven't met yet. So.
Right, so in addition to them being from different regions, we have very little to kind of go on to directly compare the Canada with the uh, South American teams, which will be a point in our discussion. But before we get to that, let's talk about the odds. And what I have here, Connor, is the odds to advance from the group. So that would mean a first or second place finish.
That's right. Not necessarily to win the group or the tournament. Argentina is given a 96% chance of advancing. Next, actually, is Chile. They are ranked behind Peru in both FIFA and ELO, but they're given a 50% chance of getting through. Peru is given a 1/3 chance, or 33% of advancing, and Canada 29%.
Right, and we'll leave that graphic on for a little while as we begin our discussion. It's not a bad place to begin. Peru came in as a second seed team, but the odds makers seem to prefer Chile. Let's maybe begin our discussion with that before we look at Argentina, which is a pretty clear-cut case, I would say.
Yeah, I think an interesting point among Peru and Chile and Canada is that neither team can claim to be coming in great form. Peru's had a very rocky start to World Cup qualifying, as had Chile, who also didn't perform as well in recent tournaments and qualifying. And then Canada, who have really peaked during World Cup qualifying, have kind of declined since then and even labored a little bit to qualify for this tournament. So I do think all three teams are relatively even. But unfortunately, we can't look to the form guide necessarily to give one team an advantage.
Yeah, and actually, I'm a bit even more surprised because Chile, I guess we'd have to say the World Cup form is better, but none of them, as you say, are looking particularly strong coming into this tournament. We'll get to later whether you see Chile or Peru as the stronger team. But let's begin our team-by-team look with Argentina, obviously coming in good form themselves.
Yeah, the strongest team and in the best form. I think their win against Brazil was their most recent match. So, I mean, it's hard to see the World Cup winners, certainly not advancing from the group, but not kind of advancing in first place. Do you agree with me?
I have to. I mean, I think the only question here is, even if they do kind of lapse by giving up some points in the group stage, I don't think they would lapse to the point of failing to pass the group. So it's a bit of a non-issue. So I'll throw the question back at you. And do you see them dropping any points here?
Not really. I mean, sometimes the bigger teams do warm up the tournaments. They lost their opener in the last World Cup, but they probably have learned from that. Maybe they drop a point, but it's tough to say. I mean, they'll sometimes drop points on the road, but neither, this is all on neutral ground. Argentina does seem to be the far superior team, so I think 9 points is the most likely outcome.
Yeah, and just in case it's not clear to our listeners, it is on the neutral ground, all the games being played in the USA. And I should say that it begins with Canada and Argentina playing in Atlanta. Let's hope that Argentina begins their Copa America the way they did the World Cup.
That's right.
The only problem is now they're probably immunized against that, probably will take Canada a bit more seriously because of what happened in the World Cup.
Yeah. I mean, Argentina currently hold both the Copa America and World Cup titles. They'll want to be forming a dynasty here at the end of Messi's career.
Yeah, and I gotta say, like in tournaments, we saw Chile beating them in the finals of both World Cups. Until they did win that title in 2021, they looked very anxious. I think Messi quit the team at one point, and there was a lot of anxiety. Their drought from 1991, but they seem a lot more relaxed a team now.
I agree with that entirely. It was a monkey off their back for sure, and I think that Copa America title was the precursor to World Cup success.
Yeah, and now that they have those titles, I think they'll be have a bit less anxiety. Even if they don't win this tournament, I think they'll be playing in a more enjoy the game kind of fashion.
Yeah.
Okay, well, Peru is the second place team. What are their claims to that? They're looking weaker in World Cup qualifying. They have an inferior record head to head. Do you see any claim really for Peru being the second place team? I guess they have a better record in the Copa America over the last 2 or 3 versions, because Chile won the 2 before that.
Yeah, I guess for Peru, I mean they last time they finished second in their group and got to the semifinals. Chile didn't manage that, and they also finished ahead of Chile in World Cup qualifying. So I guess the recent form does show them being a stronger team than Chile, even if the odds makers disagree. But I probably tend to agree that Peru, despite their kind of drop off in form, they've kind of, over the course of a longer tournament, the Copa America and the longer World Cup qualifying, they managed to sustain better performances and better results for a little bit longer.
Yeah, I agree with you. I actually favor Peru. I mean favor as in see them as a little bit stronger here. You were talking about the 2022 World Cup campaign where you said they finished ahead of Chile. And, 4 out of 5 of the last Copa Americas, they finished in the semifinals or better. So they have a good record in the Cup. Perhaps a stronger team in the Cup than in their general play. So they can be a lot of trouble. Chile still have some of the players of that great generation that they had. They're not as effective they used to, but I believe Alexis Sanchez and who's the defender who played for Cardiff?
Yeah, Gary Medel.
Yeah, the captain. I think he's the captain. Both of those still playing for the team, so they still do have some strength.
Yeah, older players for sure. I think that the World Cups 2014 in 2010 and 2014, and then the 2 Copa America victories, that was really a golden generation for Chile. Historically they haven't been that strong of a team, but they really did have a fabulous generation of players come through. And that generation is aging out, either retired or kind of into their later 30s. Arturo Vidal will be another name. Mauricio Isla. I'm not sure if they're still with the team, but
yeah, we'll wait for the player podcast on that. Some of them are still there and some of them are gone. I think Isla is gone. We won't get into the details here, though.
Yeah, I think it's proven though that Chile have struggled to obviously replace that talent with younger blood. So I until maybe another kind of crop of young players emerges, I probably see Chile's decline maybe continuing or at least kind of bottoming out where it is now. So I favor Peru for that reason.
Yeah, that's where it is. I mean, it has been pretty much a steady decline over the last few years, and I wonder if the odds makers are still influenced by those two titles. I've talked to a few soccer fans who basically, because of those titles in 2015 and 16, thought Chile was one of the top teams in South America. And, I kind of told them, no, in the longer view, this is a fabulous period for them. Traditionally, they're a team probably slightly weaker than Peru. And like you said, I see them as slightly weaker coming into this cup.
Yeah.
Now, an interesting question is, where does Canada fit into all of this? We saw that the ELO odds at least gave them a chance. The odds makers aren't giving them a lot here, and we have no information from head-to-head victories. A bit apples and oranges to compare CONCACAF and CONMEBOL.
Yeah, which makes this tournament interesting. I think Canada kind of, as you said, they have a chance. They have a chance to be competitive with these two teams. In a lot of tournaments now, we see third place teams advancing one way or another. I think Canada could finish third. Can they finish second? That's going to require, at least a win and a draw, probably against Chile and Peru, or a shock result against Argentina. I'm not sure if Canada quite have that to finish second out of 4. But it's kind of unknown. They're a young team. I think this will be a great experience for them. I think Canada as a team is looking to test themselves against better opposition. But as we saw in the World Cup, when they were there, although competitive at the game level, they didn't manage to get a point. And I think they're kind of early, this young team's early on that stage of getting used to playing, strong soccer nations. So yeah, I think it'll be a test, but I wouldn't necessarily expect them to pass the group stage.
Yeah, there's a lot to talk about here with Canada. I feel, you said earlier, they've been in decline a little bit since the World Cup. They're still doing well in their region, but they made the finals for the 2023 Nations Cup, but not for the 2024. There is something to think about with their manager, the manager who so inspired them, John Herdman, through the World Cup qualifying campaign in 2022 there. That kind of, I wouldn't say went sour, but that kind of brotherhood, that teamsmanship that he created there kind of really did fall off after the World Cup. Now he's not the manager anymore. And then just recently they've announced the American manager coming in. Do you want to tell us a little bit about him?
Yeah, Jesse Marsch, most recently employed by Leeds United in the Premier League. So yeah, I think for Canada losing their manager, John Herdman, I think he was a lot of the reason for their success. I think Jesse Marsch, this is going to be his first tournament. I mean, he's only just appointed. He's got about a month to prepare for the tournament. That's not a lot of time to try and rebuild that unity and kind of get the players used to his coaching. So I think it's a big ask stepping into a difficult tournament like this.
Yeah, I would say, for Canada to be competitive here, a lot of things need to fall into place, as you say, kind of how the new coach and the team will get along, and whether they'll bring a B team at all. Do you have any, an A team at all? Do you have any questions whether they'll bring a B team as they did for the 2023 Gold Cup?
No, I think they were probably even focusing more on this tournament than the Gold Cup. I think they really want to do well here. It's a much bigger stage for them. And again, it's a type of teams that they want to be playing with and competing with. So I think this is a very kind of important test and important tournament for them. What do you think would be a good result for Canada?
Well, I mean, if they are bringing their best and kind of, as you say, putting a new team together under the new manager, I think there is no third place here that they can advance like a lot of tournaments nowadays, the Euro Cup. So it's second or bust, and I think there's an outside chance. I just feel like a lot of things would have to fall together, fall into place for them to challenge well enough to finish second here. So honestly, as a Canadian, I'd be happy with, say, a competitive third place finish. But I don't really expect them to finish second here. How about you?
Yeah, I think third place would be great. I think probably even with the new manager, they're looking a bit more at performances and competitiveness. I think they'd rather play well and maybe lose than not perform well and get the points. I think they want to be competitive. So I would kind of look for keeping the score down against Argentina and putting in good matches against Peru and Chile, and hopefully getting the points they deserve out of that.
Yeah, of course, I'd be delighted if they did finish second, and I don't think it's completely out of the question. But again, a little bit hard to kind of compare. We know that CONMEBOL is a much stronger region than CONCACAF. So even if Canada is looking good in the CONCACAF region, it doesn't necessarily mean that they'll be able to compete even with the mid-level CONMEBOL teams.
Yeah, I agree.
All right, well, let's talk a little bit about the teams just in terms of their prospects beyond the group stage. We expect Argentina to advance. Seems to me like anything but the final would be a disappointment for them.
Yeah, absolutely. And probably some in the camp will think anything but winning, especially with some good results against, Brazil, probably their main rivals recently. So yeah, I think that's it for Argentina. I think when Peru finished second in the group stage in Copa America last time, they ended up playing the third place team from the other group. Now finishing second means playing a first place team. So I think whichever team finishes second would struggle to get beyond the next round. But yeah, for Argentina, it's trying to get to the final again.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, yeah, they will be bolstered by beating Brazil in their last two meetings. I think the final of the Copa America and then the away win, their most recent game in World Cup qualifying. So as you say, I think there will be a lot of Argentinian fans who would be even disappointed with the second place finish. But I think a lot of the players would be satisfied with a competitive visit to the final.
Yeah.
And I'm with you completely. I think any of these, or whoever does finish in second place, the quarterfinal will probably be the end. As you say, they meet the first place team in another group. So just getting to the quarterfinal will probably be a fairly satisfactory result for any of these teams, and certainly getting beyond it. Beyond the quarterfinal would be a dream. Maybe Peru comes in with slightly higher expectations because they've done it recently. But yeah, as you say, a bit tougher to do this time.
Yeah, I agree.
All right, Connor. Well, I'm going to nail you down here. You're always a bit dodgy on these things, but it's time. It's time for you to say your final prediction for the group.
I'm going to say Argentina first, and I say that with a high degree of confidence. I do think this will be a competitive group for the remaining advancing spot, but I'm going to go the order, go with the pod order basically, and say Peru, Chile, Canada. I'd love to see Canada finish third, but I'm not going to predict it.
Right. Well, I disagree with you slightly. For me, it's Canada winning the group and winning the tournament. That brings us to the end. No, okay. I wish that were the case, but I'm with you on that. Argentina in first. I think Peru is slightly stronger among the three, and Canada slightly weaker among the three. But I certainly wouldn't be surprised if it finished in any order amongst those three. So I'm really looking forward to this group, not least of all because Canada's part of it, and we face Messi in Atlanta in the opener, and can only hope that goes the way Saudi Arabia went.
I was going to say Messi faces Alphonso Davies, but we'll
yeah, that's right. Okay, well, that brings us to the end of our look at Group A, and so we will come back with Group B.
All right, I will see you then.
We would like to thank Paul Udin and Pixabay for the wonderful background music accompanying this media cast. The piece is called Victory Epic Music.